Hey guys, it's Ro here, welcome back to my channel, and in this video we're going to be talking about all the books I read in 2019. Now, instead of just going through a whole list of books one by one, I'm going to be going through month by month, so it's kind of showing you how many books I read in this month and how many books I pretty much didn't read in this month. Starting off in January, I finished War Storm by Victoria Aveyard. I rated this a 5 out of 5. I thought it was a pretty good ending. There were a lot of times in here where I was really annoyed, but obviously if I rated it at 5 out of 5, I think it was a good finale to the series. The next book I read was Siewert by Sarah Henning. I rated this a 4 out of 5 because I don't think I liked the ending as much as what it could have been. I did really enjoy the story and it was a really quick read for me, but I feel like there was something else that was kind of missing from the ending. I know that it was a kind of Little Mermaid retelling. There were a couple things in here that would have told me otherwise. The next book I read was The Unbecoming of Mara Dyer by Michelle Hodkin. Obviously, you guys have heard a lot about this book and its series on my channel, so I rated this a 5 out of 5. I do agree with that because I love the story, I loved the characters. This book was overall just amazing. The next one I read was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I also rated this a 5 out of 5. I do think this was kind of like a kick-ass story involving a girl kind of close to my age that was showing that she's very powerful, and I think I really liked it in that aspect. The story was good, but I think the character Selena had really made me love the story more. By the way, I'm not doing descriptions of the book, I'm just pretty much summarizing why I gave the rating, and I'm telling you the rating, obviously. The last book I read in January was The Savage Song by V.E. Schwab. I rated this a 4 out of 5. I think there were a few things missing when it came to like character development. Although something I really did like was the fact that the two main characters didn't fall in love throughout the book, and that was something I've never seen before, so I don't know why I didn't rate this a 5 out of 5. Although I'm not going to change it now that I've thought about it more. I probably rated it a 4 out of 5 when I read it for a specific reason, and obviously it's been close to a year since I've read this. So I definitely had different feelings when I first read this. Now, going into February. The first book I read in February was The Terrorist Son by Zach Abraham. I don't really know if I pronounced his last name right, but I'm hoping I did. I had to read this for a class, but honestly I really enjoyed this book and kind of like the history that it shows. I loved the story that the man told, and this is actually a non-fiction book, so it's kind of amazing reading about it, and I definitely really liked it. I had rated it a 5 out of 5 because I thought this book was amazing and the story was, like I said, amazing. And I think it's a book that other people should also read. The next book in February that I read was The Evolution of Mara Dyer by Michelle Hodkin. I rated this a 5 out of 5 because I could love the continuation of the story. I continue to love the characters and, you know, pretty much the story itself. It had grown from the first book, and I think I started loving it even more. Although I don't think I'm going to be able to like the second or third book more than the first one. I really did enjoy the first one. The next book was The Retribution of Mara Dyer, the last book of the series. I also rated this a 5 out of 5. I did enjoy the third book. Probably not as much as the first two, but this still was a really good ending to the series. Although, as you will see in the next two books, it did continue on into the Noah Shaw trilogy. Although there are only 2 books out, but yeah. There were a couple things I disliked about this book, but I still rated it a 5 out of 5 because I think the series just has like some spot in my heart. I don't know why, I just really loved this series for some odd reason. The next book I read in February was The Becoming of Noah Shaw, also by Michelle Hodkin. I rated this a 4 out of 5 because I really didn't like the way that Noah was treating Mara in this book. I think that was a big downer in this book, but I think it kind of turned out at the end. Well, the end of this book was very different for me, which is why I wanted to read the second one. Halfway through this book, I was telling myself that I didn't want to read the second one because I was not liking the story, but the ending had encouraged me to go on to the second one. So I think that's why I gave it a 4 out of 5 instead of a 3 out of 5, because there was still some expectation that I liked this book by the end of it. The last book of February that I read was The Reckoning of Noah Shaw by Michelle Hodkin. I gave this one a 5 out of 5, and I don't quite remember why. I think the fact that Mara wasn't in this one and that there wasn't really a big relationship between Mara and Noah was a big point in it. It kind of gave us a point of view of Noah and how he was feeling about the whole situation. And it also showed how much Noah actually misses Mara, and I think that kind of gave a little effect on why I gave it a 5 out of 5. The ending was absolutely insane, which is why I think I liked this so much. Now I just have to wait for the third book to come out because it's still not out yet, but I will actually be picking that up because that is a book that I would want to be reading here soon. Now once again, moving on to the month of March. The first book of March that I read was The Crown of Midnight by Sarah J Maas. I had started continuing on in the series, and obviously this was the second book. I definitely liked the first book more than this one because there were a couple things on this one that were confusing me a little bit. Although I did really like the relationship between Cale and Selena. Although it didn't end up where I wanted it to, I really did like the little romance that this book had. It also improved Selena's assassin skills and how badass she was, so I think that's also why I rated this a 5 out of 5. The next book in March that I read was City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. Now don't get mad at me, you guys, but I rated this a 3 out of 5. I personally did not like this book. I liked it a little bit the second time reading through it, but I kind of read this story over and over again by watching the movie and watching the TV series and reading this twice. I'm just ready to move on to the second book because I feel like I'm going to like the series a lot more because I'm not going to know the story that I'm reading that much. And that's pretty much why I gave this book a 3 out of 5 because I've kind of seen the story over and over again. So I'm ready to move on to the next book when I buy it. The last book I read in March was The Shadow Glass by Rin Chupeco. I give this a 5 out of 5 because you guys, I ugly cried about it. There are a few books I've ever ugly cried about and this was definitely one of them. This was an amazing ending to the series and I'm excited for the next book series that Rin Chupeco is writing. I don't doubt that I will eventually be rereading the series because I loved it so much. Now moving on into April. The first book that I read in April was We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I rated this a 4 out of 5 because I really loved the book, but I feel like it was lacking a few things. The twists and the surprise in the book were amazing, but like I said, I feel like it was kind of lacking in a few things. I think that was a relationship between the main character and someone else. The next book in April I read was Hunting Prince Dracula by Kerri Maniscalco. I rated this a 5 out of 5 because you guys, this book was absolutely amazing like the rest of the books in her series. I heavily enjoyed reading this. It was a read that I read in one sitting because I had school off that day because there was no electricity, so they didn't really want us there. Well, there's no electricity at my house either, so I pretty much sat on the couch using the daylight and read this book and We Were Liars. I love the characters in the series and I want nothing else for them besides getting married, which I know they do in the fourth book because I read somewhat spoilers about it, so sorry if that's a spoiler for you. The last book I read in April was Scythe by Neal Shusterman. I rated this a 4 out of 5 because I kind of feel like the relationship between the two apprentices were kind of forced. They didn't really have feelings for each other throughout the book, and then at the end it was like all of a sudden they have these insane feelings for each other, and I didn't really like that. I mean, I liked the rest of the world and I liked the story, but I just didn't like that aspect of kind of being friends throughout the entire book and then all of a sudden having these heavy feelings at the end of the book that kind of showed up out of nowhere. I didn't really like that. That's just it. Now going into May. Starting off in May, I read Caraval by Stephanie Garber. Obviously, I rated this a 5 out of 5. You guys know how much I love this series. The first book was very good when it came to relationships and characters. This book made me cry, not ugly cry, but it made me cry. The ending was really sad and it made me think about my own sister, which I think that's why it mostly made me cry. I just really love how this world was built and the characters in it, and that's pretty much why I love this so much. The next book I read was Legendary, the second book to Caraval. I rated this a 5 out of 5 because it continued on the story and it went to a new place and I absolutely loved it. We are introduced to new characters and we are also introduced to a new world, so that was fun in an aspect, and we are introduced to a new relationship, aka Tella and oh, I can't say that. AKA Tella and Dante, which is a relationship that I ship 100%. I actually like that relationship more than Scarlett and Julian. Sorry, but in the second book, I didn't really like Julian and Scarlett's relationship. Easy as that. But I still rated this a 5 out of 5. The reason I read those last two books was because this book was coming out. So this book came out May 7th and I just had to have it. This book is called Finale, also by Stephanie Garber. It is the finale of the Caraval series. I obviously rated this a 5 out of 5. I loved it. The ending was amazing. The character development was amazing. There were just so many things that happened in this book that I absolutely loved. The last book in May that I read was Again But Better by Christine Riccio. I rated this a 5 out of 5 because it was absolutely amazing. Christine is a YouTuber that I've been watching for years, and I was just so happy that she came out with a book finally. The writing was amazing, I loved the characters, the story was absolutely amazing. It made me actually get excited for college, and it showed me that people do struggle, but they can come out strong in the end. Even if you are an introverted dork. Yeah, that's me. Well, for the most part. I can be social if I want to be social. I'm really excited for her to come out with a second book. It's not going to be the second book of Again But Better, but a different book. Which either way, I'm going to be excited. Now, on our way into June. The first book I read in June was Elegy by Amanda Hocking. Look how thick this book is. I really like this book, but I feel like there was something that was off about it. So I rated it a 4 out of 5. I did think it was a good ending, but like I said, I think there was something off. I don't quite remember why I rated it that way because it was half a year ago, but if I didn't feel strongly about it, I didn't feel strongly about it. The next and the last book of June was Heir to Fire by Sarah J Maas. I rated this a 5 out of 5. I absolutely loved it. The story has developed to the point where I can start calling her Elaine now. I don't know how many times I've called her Elaine while talking about Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight, but trust me, I've done it a million times and I will have to edit that out in this video. This book was by far the best book out of the first 3, which I really enjoyed it. I love the green cover, I'm not gonna lie. It looks about a lot better than like the purplish blue and the orange. It's actually very attractive compared to the other 2 colors. I don't know, but this story development was way better in this 3rd book. Now, going into July. The first book I read was Queen of Shadows by Sarah J Maas. As you can see, this is going to be a continuation of Sarah J Maas books because I started reading this after Heir to Fire. That's when I really started getting into the Sarah J Maas books and the Throne of Glass series. I rated this a 5 out of 5. There were a couple things I didn't like about it, but I mostly liked the fact that Elaine was starting to become more of a badass and more comfortable with herself. I do remember the only thing I didn't like about this book was how Cale was treating Elaine. I wanted to go in there and bitch slap him, but you know what? I can't do that. The next and last book of July was Empire of Storms by Sarah J Maas. I struggled to read through this one, and that's why I lacked reading so much in July, but I finished it on the absolute last day of July because I didn't want to just have one book read in July. I also rated this a 5 out of 5. It was a really crazy book to read. There were a lot of point of views, there were a lot of like stories happening. The ending was absolutely insane, which drove me to reading the next 2 books, obviously. It's actually a very heavy book. It feels heavier than all the other books that I've held so far. I always forget that this book even happened, I'm not gonna lie, even though this book is probably the most like event-filled besides Empire of Storms, but this book was still an amazing book. There was a lot of character development when it came to Elaine and her crew. A lot of things had happened to them and it kind of made them closer. Time to go into August. Starting off, I'm saying that I read Two Princes of Summer by Nisa Letter. I read this on my phone, so I only have a picture of it, which I read the rest of the series on the phone, so throughout this video you will see pictures of this series. I gave this book a 5 out of 5 because it was very entertaining for me, and obviously I liked it that much to go on to reading the rest of the series. I liked Scarlet, and I liked the fact that she kind of had this thing between the 2 brothers, although I did favor one brother more than the other, but we're not going to talk about that because her and relationships wise in the series is very complicated. The next book in August that I read was Tower of Dawn by Sarah J Maas. This was the only Throne of Glass book that I rated a 4 out of 5. I didn't enjoy the story as much because I didn't think it was as helpful to the story, aka the series, but I did enjoy being introduced to new characters, and I liked the character development of Cale. At the beginning of this book, I really hated him, and at the end, I was okay with him. That's something that doesn't happen very often. Like the Cinder series, I hated Cinder throughout the entire series, even though she should have had a redemption at the end, but didn't. I didn't like her, but somehow he got me to like him throughout this book. So that's probably why he got a 4 instead of a 3. I did like Uraine, so that did help a lot. The last 2 books I read in August were Prisoner of Darkness and Whims of Fate by Nisa Letter. I rated Prisoner of Darkness 5 out of 5 and Whims of Fate 3 out of 5. Not 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5. The reason I rated this one 5 out of 5 because it took us into a new world and we are introduced to new characters that I like a lot more than the characters in the first book. Then this one I rated a 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5. Why do I keep saying 3 out of 5? Because this story, I disliked this one the most out of the rest of the series. There's always that one book you dislike in a series, and that's this one. I continue to like the characters, except for I think Scarlet I started to not like as much, but then I started to like her towards the end. It's just this whole thing. It's just, I liked it, but I didn't like it. Easy as that. Now, going on into September. The first book was A Dark Eternity by Nyssa Letter. Apparently, I also rated this a 4 out of 5. So I guess the more I started reading, the less I'm disliking the series. I mean, I'm reading the 6th book right now, sort of, and currently I'm really liking it. So this one will most likely have a 5 out of 5. But right now, A Dark Eternity, I guess I didn't like. Well, I liked it, I just didn't like it as much. The story kind of went off task on what I thought it was going to be, and it introduced some characters that I personally don't like the most. I mean, I don't dislike them to the point where I just like hate them, but they're not favorites of mine. I'll say that. Next and last book of September that I had actually been reading throughout August and September was Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J Maas. All these Nyssa Letter books I've been reading in between while reading this book because I knew if I didn't, I would not even be close to making my goal. So this book is massive, obviously, and it took me 2 months to read, which I'm really disappointed with because if I would have just sat down, I probably could have gotten this done within 1 month. And I wouldn't be stressing out right now to be finishing my book and my next 2 books for my goal. I definitely rated this a 5 out of 5. It was an absolutely amazing ending. I think that everything in here was almost relevant to the ending of it. I'm sure there were a few things that I think weren't really needed in the ending, but you know what? It's okay because the ending was the ending and we got to see everything happen. I think I ugly cried in this part. I definitely ugly cried in this book at the end. I'm not going to say anything besides 13. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say. Moving into spooky October. The first book I read in October was Escaping from Houdini, and I gave this definitely a 5 out of 5. I read this book in 1.5 days, and this was absolutely amazing. So far, I think this is my favorite. The characters were awesome. I do love the fact that it was like a carnival. I think I've gotten the feeling that I really like carnivals. I think that's why I really like Carnival. The third book kind of shows us more of Audrey Rose and Thomas's relationship and how all relationships struggle, but they can turn out in the end if you really try. Guys, I finally broke and bought the 4th book in hardcover, and it will be here in 4 days. 4 days. I'm very excited. I'm finally gonna get to read the end of this series, and I will probably start rereading it after I read the last book. The next book I read was House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. I rated this a 4 out of 5. I really love the story, but there were a few things that I thought were lacking. I didn't think that the characters were underdeveloped, but there were a few characters where there were a few scenes that I just didn't like. Like the whole princess and the best friend, and how the princess was really freaking rude to the best friend when he said he had feelings. I think that's the only thing I really didn't like about this book. That's probably why I rated this a 4 out of 5. But besides that, I really like the 12 Dancing Princesses retelling. I think that's probably is my favorite fairy tale retelling is the 12 Dancing Princesses. The next one I read was One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. I gave this a 4 out of 5 because I absolutely hated the ending. Sorry, this is going to be a spoiler. I'm going to be putting a spoiler up until I'm done spoiling. I hated that Bronwyn and Nate broke up. I suspected that he killed himself, but I think that was so freaking stupid. I would have wanted a different ending. Okay, spoiler gone. But that's pretty much why I give this a 4 out of 5. There were 2 things that I just listed that I gave this a 4 out of 5. Although I have pre-ordered the second book, and that is also coming in like 5 days. I am excited. The next book I read in October was Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I gave this a 4 out of 5 because I really wanted more romance between the 2 main characters. I mean, I'm not a person that absolutely needs romance, but in this aspect, I would have loved it if the 2 main characters would have had more of it. They had like 1 scene of romance, and you know what? I like the 2 characters together, and I wish there would have been more. It's just simple as that. I'm really excited for the second book because I absolutely loved this. It was actually my first adult book that I read, so go me. Apparently that was the last book of October. Now let's go into November. The first book of November was Five Dark Fates by Kendare Blake. I gave this a 5 out of 5 because I loved the ending. Well, I hated it, but I loved it. I'm about to give a spoiler, so once again, spoiler. I hated that Mirabella died. Hated and loved that Catherine died, but I loved and hated the fact that they all made up, in a way. But I think overall I did like the ending. It was a little odd, but you know what? That's kind of how this world is. The next book I read in November was Yellow Brick War by Daniel Page. I didn't think I would be continuing on in the series, but I said, you know what? I'm just gonna get it done because I have it. I gave this a 4 out of 5 because I think it could have been a lot better in more than one aspect. I don't know if I will be getting the next book. I think this was a good ending for me, but most likely I will be getting the last book just to read it because it is the ending of the series, and you know, gotta read the ending of the series. This book was just really weird in the human world. I think that's why I really didn't like it. The next book I read in November was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I gave this a 4 out of 5 because I feel like it was lacking something in emotion-wise. Other than that, I really liked the end of this book. The ending was very shocking, and I loved the ending. I think I just had some issues between two of the characters, aka the main character and her sister. I think that's why I mostly gave this a 4 out of 5. The next book I read was The Wicked King, also by Holly Black. I also gave this a 4 out of 5 because the relationship between Taryn and her twin sister just totally went downhill from there, and I really disliked Taryn. I don't know why I was calling Taryn. It's Jude and Taryn. Jude's the main character. Taryn is her sister. I literally know this. I don't know why I'm confused about it. I'm not really confused. I just kept saying Taryn. Like I said, I give this a 4 out of 5. I didn't really like this one as much as I probably should have. I did like the ongoing relationship between Jude and Carden. I would have wanted more, but you know what? I got that in the third book. Speaking of the third book, that's the one I read next. I rated this one a 5 out of 5. I read this in literally one day because it was so amazing, and I loved the ending of it because Jude is finally happy with Carden. Taryn and Jude make up. They're all a big happy family, and I love it. And I actually like that Jude and Carden are in a real relationship with love. I think that's pretty much why I did this a 5 out of 5, along with Jude and Taryn made up. I hated Taryn in the first two books, but she had a big redemption in the third book, and I think that made up for the first two books. The next book I read was A Cursed Rain by Nisa Letter. I also gave this a 4 out of 5. Like I said, I think the series is starting to go downhill with kind of the character-wise. It's getting really confusing between the love interests, and I think that's kind of making it a little hard to know, okay, I know who I want to love Scarlet the most. I know who I want Scarlet with, but she keeps adding these love scenes with the other contender. I just don't know if I like it that much. I think that's why I did a 4 out of 5. The next book I read / looked at was Teen Titans Raven by Cami Garcia and Gabriel Picalo. I have been following Gabriel, the illustrator, for years because I loved his illustrations so much, and I just had to have his work. Honestly, it was a really good story. The art was amazing, obviously, and I'm pre-ordering the Beast Boy comic book. I'm excited for that. I don't quite remember when that comes out, but yeah. I gave this a 5 out of 5 because, like I said, the illustration was amazing because it is a comic book and you do have to take that into account when rating it. I think the story was a developed story that I did like. It's different from what I've seen for the most part. Obviously, besides her name and who she's staying with, but the whole Raven has this demon inside of her and blah blah blah. All of that. That was the last book for November. Now moving on into December. Now I do own this book, but it is in a box set and it's very difficult to get out. The first book I read and finished in December was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I rated this a 4 out of 5 because I feel like there were a few scenes that were written really quickly and I had to reread them over a couple times to actually understand the scenes. Don't get me wrong, you Harry Potter lovers. I loved the book and I love Harry Potter and the movies, the book, but I'm just saying some of the scenes were really quick and that's the only reason why I didn't get 5 out of 5 stars. I'm going to continue reading on in the series and I already know that it's probably going to get better. No one ever talks about how the first one was their favorite. They always talk about how the later ones were their favorite, which means the writing probably changes, which means my opinion will probably change as well. The next book I read was Courting Darkness by Robin LaFevers. This is the first book in her add-on trilogy, I think, to her original trilogy, His Fair Assassins. I rated this a 5 out of 5. I absolutely loved it, and I could wish for nothing else as a new book series. Look at the deckled edges! Which, yes, I corrected myself on that. You're welcome. Not to be rude, I'm just saying you're welcome, and thank you, because I don't know why. I don't even know what I said last time. Probably speckled. The characters in this were amazing. I loved the actual story. Although I wish the relationship with Genevieve would have gone well with the other person, which I'm not saying. But you know what? It didn't happen. But it better happen in Igniting Darkness because I'm pre-ordering that too. The next book that I want to talk about is Night by Elie Wiesel. I had to read this for class again and I rated it a 5 out of 5. And because I read it for my class. I don't have it, so here's a picture of the cover. I did really like the story. Like I said, it is the second time I read it, so I wasn't really surprised by anything. I think this is one of the few nonfiction books that I do really enjoy reading. I like learning about the history of others sometimes, but I think the story is really a change when it comes to what I read. So I think it was a good book. I don't really want to read it again because I've read it twice, both for class. But if I have to, I'm not gonna die because honestly it was a really good book that other people should read because I think it is an important book that other people need to learn about. The next book I read was Half Bad by Sally Green. I really love this book. I finished it fairly quickly. I actually really like this book and the series I didn't think I was going to like as much. I've had these books since freshman year and I'm a senior now, so I'm really glad that I finally got done with it. I don't really think there were many things that I don't think there's anything that I disliked about this book. I just don't think I wanted to rate it a 5 out of 5. There could be many reasons, but there could be no reasons. I'm not really quite sure why I rated this a 4 out of 5. I just know that I didn't want to rate it a 5 out of 5. The next one I read was Half Wild, which is the second book to Half Bad. I read this very quickly. I read this one night. I read like 250 pages in one night, and the next day I was at Christmas and I finished it, which ended up bringing me to the third book. I rated this book a 4 out of 5 because I think that there were some things that were lacking. There was a new setting and new characters. I mean, I liked the characters and I liked the setting. I just think that it was very crazy. The ending was actually really insane. I liked that the main character got to meet who he wanted to meet. I really do appreciate kind of like the fact that they did get to form a relationship, and I'm talking about Nate and his dad, aka that was a spoiler, so hopefully I didn't spoil you. There aren't a lot of people that want to read this book just because it's not as known. Well, it says known now, so read the book because I think it's a really good series. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not done reading this book, but I have about 100 pages left, not even, and I don't really know what I'm going to rate it, so I can't really rate it. So far, I am really enjoying this book. I am going to sit down right after this video and finish it, along with the next 2 books that I am including in this video, because if I put them in this video, then I have to finish them by Tuesday. I think Tuesday is the 31st. Yes. So far, I'm really enjoying this book. Not as much as the second one, I'm not gonna lie. It does get pretty hectic, but I'm hoping that the ending is going to be a good ending. Those are all the books I read this year, but now it is time for pretty much the review of my reading year. I'm using my phone because I screenshotted what I needed to look at. So my shortest book was The Terrorist Son of 112 pages. My longest book was Kingdom of Ash, 984 pages. My most popular book I read was Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, which is actually kind of surprising that it wasn't Kingdom of Ash, I'm not going to lie. Or The Queen of Nothing. That was a really big one that came out along with Ninth House. I'm just really surprised that this was the most popular this year. It's kind of crazy. And the least popular I read was A Cursed Rain with only 571 ratings. Which, I mean, I don't really blame them for not reading it because I'm on the last book and I still haven't finished it, but the series was kind of like a quick series that I could read, so I didn't completely fail my goal. My average rating this year is about a 4.5. I did a lot of 5-point books, but I also did a lot of 4-point books, so it doesn't surprise me that my average rating was a 4.5. The highest rated book on my Goodreads I rated was Kingdom of Ash. It got a 4.59 average, which means it was either a 4 or a 5. Obviously, I rated it a 5. My first actual review of the year was The Becoming of Noah Shaw. My review was, honestly, the only reason I want to read the next book is because of the epilogue. This book really pissed me off a lot. Now, my last review of this year was An Absolute Amazing Ending to 5 Dark Fates. I'm probably not going to be leaving any reviews for the last couple books I'm reading because I don't think I'm going to feel that strongly. And that is all of the things I have to tell you about my reading year. Alright guys, I'm not going to lie and tell you that I haven't already planned what I'm going to be reading in January. So far, I have 12 books planned for January. It's a lot of rereading, I'm not going to lie. There's 2 series which I will be rereading and they each have 3 books. So it'll be very interesting. You'll see a video in January, probably the first week or two of January, most likely the second week of what I will be telling you what my TBR is going to be. I'm going to be posting this, and then I will also be posting a what books I got for Christmas video, because that is way shorter and I will be posting that before this. Anyways guys, that is the end of this video. Comment down below what you read this year, what your favorite book you read, what your least favorite book you read, anything you really want to talk about in the comments. Subscribe to my channel to see more videos like this. I will see you next time guys. Bye!